Hello and welcome to the Run Testers. My name's Nick, and in this video I'm going to be comparing the Asics Superblast and the Adidas Boston 12. This video is brought to you in partnership with Precision Fueling and Hydration, and let's talk a little bit about fueling and hydration before we dive into the details on the two shoes, because it doesn't matter how good your shoes are, if you're not getting those two things right on the run, you're not going to have a very good time of it. Precision Fueling and Hydration have a great range of products to help you fuel your runs, whether that's carb gels, carb drinks, or electrolyte tabs and electrolyte mixes. And they've also got a really handy race calculator on the website, which you can use for races or general training runs to basically plan out your run and see exactly what you might need in terms of fuel and hydration. I used it quite recently when I was lining up a 51k run out on my holiday in Wales, and it was really useful just to try and gauge exactly what I might need for a run that was much longer than anything else I'd done in the past. Using that tool, you can customize things like the expected conditions on the day, your expected effort, and then you'll get some advice you can use to try and build a nutrition and hydration plan for it. It's important to heed the advice because I didn't really, and I ran out of water on my run, which wasn't very smart at all. You can check that out on the Precision Fueling and Hydration website, and if you use the link in the caption below, you'll also get 15% off their entire range of products. All right, let's dive into the shoes. So the Superblast and the Boston 12 are both trainers that fit into this super trainer category that we have these days of shoes that you use for your daily training that have some of the tech from super shoes in them, but they do it in a different way. There's no plate in the Superblast, that's the main difference, and it has a much higher stack height. It's also a lot more expensive. The Superblast cost £195 in the UK, or $200. That's the latest colour release, this one. I think the previous models were a little bit more expensive, but hopefully that's a sign of things to come with the shoe, that it's going to be that little bit cheaper. The Adidas Boston is a lot cheaper though. It's £140 or $160. Interestingly, the Superblast is the lighter shoe, despite the fact it's the much bigger shoe. It weighs 251 grams or 8.8 ounces in a UK 9, whereas the Boston is a 259 grams or 9.1 ounces. Boston has a 7mm drop, the Superblast drop is 8mm, and the Superblast stack height is 45.5mm at the heel, 37.5 at the forefoot, whereas the Boston is 38 at the heel and 31mm at the forefoot. On the design, the Boston has a very lightweight and stripped back mesh upper, really minimal padding around the shoe in general, very thin tongue, and a little bit of an internal heel counter at the back there. Then you've got a dual density midsole with a layer of Light Strike Pro on top. That's Adidas's best foam, the stuff used in the Adidas Pro, the bounciest, lightest foam they have. And then Light Strike 2.0 on the bottom. This is an EVA foam. It's a lot softer and lighter than the previous versions of Light Strike we saw in shoes like the Boston 10 and 11. In between those layers of foam, you have Adidas's Energy Rods 2.0. These are glass fibre infused rods that run under the forefoot of the shoe to act like a plate and create a more efficient propulsive ride. On the outside, you've got good coverage of Continental rubber, very grippy material. The forefoot's pretty much entirely covered there, and two large strips at the back. It's not the thickest layer, but it's pretty durable stuff and it grips exceptionally well. On the Superblast, you've got a pretty lightweight mesh upper, though it does have substantially more padding and more structure at the heel than you get on the Boston. Then you've also got a dual density midsole, but obviously most of it is one density. It's the FF Turbo foam on the top here. That's a really thick layer. This is Asics' best foam. It's the bouncy stuff used in shoes like the Metaspeed Sky Plus and Edge Plus. Underneath that, you've got a thin layer of FF Blast Plus, which is another pretty good foam from Asics. It's used in shoes like the Magic Speed. It's just a bit firmer and more durable than the FF on top, which is the bouncier, softer foam. Also got sidewalls of foam on this shoe and a really wide base to try and help create stability. Then the outsole, you've got some AHA Plus rubber, which is used fairly sparingly, though the key impact areas on the shoe are covered. It's a very hard material. It's pretty good on grip, but it's not as good as the Continental rubber on the Adidas for sure. So when it comes to the fit of the shoe, I've been happy in my normal size in both, which is a UK 9. In the Adidas, that equates to a US 9.5, or it's a US 10 in the Asics shoe. Now, those are my normal sizes for both brands, but you do get a slightly tighter fit in the Boston, as you'd expect from the way that that comparison works. But at the same time, the Boston in general is just a tighter fitting shoe. It's got a more racy feel to it. The upper's thinner, more stripped back. It's a less comfortable upper, I'll say, for daily training, but good for speed sessions. So I have had some heel problems with Adidas shoes in general that use this design. So I've heel locked this shoe to counter those problems, get a bit more lace pressure on the top of your foot from this shoe than with the Superblast because it is such a thin tongue. And in general, yeah, you've got a much lighter upper that is less comfortable than the one on the Superblast, which I've had no issues with at all. It's a roomy shoe, it's really comfortable, you get a good enough hold around them, heel and midfoot with plenty of room in the toes. So they are slightly different fits, but I was happy in my normal running shoe size for these brands with both of these shoes. So if you're looking at width, the Asics is the wider shoe of these two, though the Boston isn't bad on that front. It's not a wide shoe, but it's certainly wider than the Adizero shoes of old, which used to be very torpedo-like. So I'm a big fan of both of these shoes. I think they really deliver on what they set out to do, which is to be a versatile daily trainer that really can handle a mix of pretty much every kind of run, but they go about it in a different way. The Superblast is just this big max stack, very cushioned shoe with no plate, with a very bouncy and lightweight foam that delivers a really bouncy ride, whereas the Boston's almost a more traditional super trainer in that it does look and feel more like a companion to something like the Adidas Pro 3 with the similar setup in the midsole with those energy rods, whilst being a bit more durable and suitable for everyday use. Both are undoubtedly very versatile. They have the comfort for use on easy runs and long runs, but then they also have the speed if you're going to try and use them for some of your speedy training sessions as well. I'd say actually the Superblast is surprisingly speedy. Now, obviously it's more of a cruising style of speed. You get into a rhythm with it and you get bounced along very nicely, but I did go down the track with it for some 800 meter reps. I remember quite distinctly like swearing when I went through the 200 meter mark, looking down at my watch going, oh, I'm going a lot quicker than it feels like. I bounced through that in around like 34 seconds, had to take it back to then do what was quite a controlled rep for 800 meters. And yeah, it's just, it doesn't really, you don't get a lot of ground feel with the shoe, obviously, and it doesn't feel like you're moving that fast at times, but you are moving fast. It's got a really bouncy, propulsive ride. It almost feels sometimes like it does have a plate with the amount of punch you are getting from it. But then it's naturally a lot better for more kind of daily use and tempo runs. And the kind of sessions I do a lot of, especially when marathon training, which is like long progression runs or like hour-long steady efforts around marathon effort, but not marathon pace necessarily during training. And it really does hoover those up because it is fast, it is lightweight, you can get into a nice ticking rhythm with it and really bounce along at a good speed, while it protects the legs really well and it doesn't feel quite as aggressive as a plated shoe, even one like the Boston, which is obviously built for everyday training. Boston certainly feels more grounded. You get a snappier feel to it, especially when running fast, and definitely when I was doing 400 meter reps in this shoe, I could feel the pace a lot more clearly in it, judge it actually a little bit better as well, but in general you know how fast you're moving when you're using the Boston, whereas the Superblast is it's a bit more of a mystery sometimes. It definitely has a snappier feel than the Superblast when it comes to fast runs, but then I find the character of the shoe changes a little bit when you then slow down and do either long relaxed runs at a decent pace or just all out easy runs in your daily training. It feels a little bit smoother, a bit softer. The foams meld together a little bit better and you get a slightly more smooth ride compared to the snappy feel you have with it when you do up the pace. I'd also say that the foams are soft enough on the shoe that it's never felt harsh for me on long runs or anything like that. I've had no discomfort from the ride of it when I'm doing long easy runs, even with the rods in there. It's still a very high stack shoe with a couple of soft foams in there. It's not quite as high stack and soft as the Superblast, but it is still a very comfortable shoe for those long runs. Underfoot, a bit more of a problem with the upper though. I do find the upper on the Boston just not great. It's not caused me any significant problems, but it's something I kind of have to think about with each run. You get a bit of lace pressure, you have to heel lock it to avoid rubbing at the heel, I do anyway. And in general, it just feels a little bit too aggressive an upper for a shoe that I want to use for a bit of everything, really. It does have the edge though on grip compared to the Superblast. This Continental rubber is great. It's really good for wet pavements. It's also very durable. Just gives you a little bit more confidence, especially if you're going to use the shoe for speedy runs where you do want reliable purchase underfoot when rounding corners, if you're doing sessions on the road or even on the track, which can obviously get very slick. The grip's not bad on the Superblast, but it's definitely not amazing, and obviously you get a bit less rubber there in general. Also, these little holes will pick up stones occasionally if you take on anything even slightly gravelly. So when I ran in both shoes at the same time, it is noticeable how much more soft and sinky the Superblast is, and it's got a much more noticeable heel in general. As a heel striker, it's really clear that you're landing on the heels in this shoe. You get a nice transition from there and it's bouncy. I don't think it's really a downside to the shoe, but it certainly is noticeable. And actually maybe sometimes it can be something that you feel when you don't want to feel. You want to get into more of a flowing rhythm with the shoe, but you do kind of hit that heel each time. I do anyway. And you get a nice transition. It's very comfortable, but with the Boston, I do think it's a faster transition. You move on to the midfoot and forefoot a little bit quicker, and you get a slightly snappier, more grounded feel as a result. And Boston has a slightly flatter feel, I'd say. There's less bounce to the midsole, but it is still pretty bouncy and it's certainly comfortable enough to use for a variety of runs, even if the Superblast does have a more comfortable feel and a bit more bounce in the midsole. A couple of cracking shoes here, both very versatile, both really enjoyable to use for a variety of runs. You could even pick up both of them and use them as a 2-shoe rotation. There is a fair amount of overlap here, but the Superblast will have the edge on things like long runs, easy runs, and then the Boston's a slightly speedier shoe. I'd say if you are looking at building a rotation though, I'd probably get the Superblast myself as the better long run shoe, easy run shoe, like tempo run shoe. I really love using it for all those runs. It's incredibly fun to run in. That's a big thing with the Superblast that I didn't mention earlier, but I should mention it. It's a shoe I really look forward to pulling on. And that's the case with the Boston a little bit, but not quite as much. And then if you did that with the Superblast, you could then pick up a more speed-focused shoe than the Boston, like something like the Magic Speed 3 from Asics, or a carbon racing shoe. Use an old carbon racing shoe as your speed shoe for a rotation. I think if you're just looking at buying one all-rounder, maybe the Boston's the slightly better pick, especially if someone does a lot of short, sharp workouts, where I do think it has the edge on the Superblast, just by being a much more nimble shoe with a snappier ride. I think the Boston is still very good for your daily training, for easy runs and all that kind of thing, and then it does have a little edge when it comes to those fast sessions. It's also race legal, probably doesn't really matter that much, but if you are considering a shoe that you want to do all your training in and racing in, then and you want to stay within those regulations that are built more for elites, then the Boston is legal and the Superblast technically isn't. You're not going to get kicked out of any races if you're using the Superblast unless you're very fast indeed, in which case you're using a carbon super shoe, obviously. So yeah, I think the Boston's a slightly more practical shoe as well, because it has got that better grip and it is a lot cheaper than the Superblast, which is really a luxury shoe, but you know, it does live up to that price tag in a way, because it is so good and it can do the job of so many shoes within a rotation. You could really get the Superblast and then just one fast shoe, and you'd have a very solid rotation for every kind of run. With the Boston, you could look at getting a more comfortable shoe as well alongside it, just because I don't think the upper's that comfortable. You might want just a pure cushion shoe to use for easy runs, and it still isn't an out-and-out speed shoe, so you still would probably be looking at getting a carbon shoe or something like that to go with it. So you're looking probably a more of a 3-shoe rotation if you're fitting the Boston into one, whereas I do think the Superblast works really well in a 2-shoe rotation, because you can just get a carbon shoe with it and then you're covered pretty much everything really well indeed. So you might save some of the money you spent on the Superblast back by only needing a couple of shoes to go between. But yeah, that's overall how I rate it. I think the Boston is a slightly more practical shoe, slightly better for those fast workouts. The Superblast is the more comfortable shoe, better for daily training, better for long runs, still pretty quick. If I was building a rotation from scratch myself right now, I'd be getting the Superblast to pair with the speed shoe. But if you are looking for the more versatile, practical, do-it-all shoe, I think the Boston 12 is that, and it is a lot cheaper, especially as it's popping up in sales quite a lot. So if there is budgetary considerations, then the Boston is very much the clear pick. The Superblast is a luxury, like I say. So that's our comparison of the Asics Superblast and the Adidas Boston 12. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Have you picked up one or both of these shoes? What did you think? Please do like, subscribe, ring the little bells. Do head to the Precision Fueling and Hydration website to check out their range of products. The link in the caption below will help you do that. And otherwise, yeah, we'll see you next time.